it really goes back to, are you thinking about the short term, which is just
Mhm.
to get a quick logo on Fiverr or Upwork, or are you really trying to build a company, build a
Hey guys, we have Luke Seavers here with me. He's from Charleston, and I have been a big fan of Luke's videos. He has a lot of content about branding, a lot about design, about logos, and Luke essentially helps entrepreneurs reflect success. In his back, you see reflect success in your brand and help their people to grow their businesses online. So, Luke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So Look has a lot of content on branding. So before look, we go into like in detail. I think branding has been a word that has been around for a long time, and I think it has sort of lost its meaning a bit. But I love some of your videos where you expand on the meaning of branding.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it definitely is probably a term that's evolved over the years. I'm sure the first use was branding a cow,
A
but
horse?
or a horse, yeah.
Mm.
Um, but what it's kind of come to mean, at least to me, probably the best definition that
Mm-hmm.
I've found for a brand, first of all, is a person's gut feeling about a product or service. And that's
Mm.
actually not an original idea. That's by a guy named Marty Neumeyer, who's the author of The Brand Gap. So he says that it's a person's gut feeling about your product or service. And then he kind of goes on to say that you can't control that process, but you can influence it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what the process of branding is influencing people's gut feeling about your company.
Yep. I think in your YouTube videos, so do check out Luke's YouTube channel. I think you gave an example of, hey, this is McDonald's logo, and what sort of, emotions are triggered when you look at a logo. When you look at a logo such as Nike, which is a famous logo, what sort of emotions do you trigger? What emotions do you trigger when you see LinkedIn's logo? So yeah, how does the logo help a brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, like you said, when you see those, even just those logo designs, um, you have some sort of memory, some sort of feeling
Yeah.
associated with those things, those companies, if you have purchased from them or interacted with them in any way. You
Mhm.
know, like you said, I gave the example of McDonald's, and that's an interesting example because for some people, they may have fond memories of maybe going there as a child, playing
Yeah.
in the place, getting
I
like a
have. Yeah.
meal. Yeah,
Yeah.
but for others, they think of Super Size Me and they think of unhealthy food. So branding it can definitely vary from person to person. But of course, McDonald's, they are trying to brand themselves a certain way to hopefully influence that in people's favor. And when
Mhm.
you do that, it really makes it much easier for them to sell in the future. Like if you accomplish good branding, it's it's hardly any work to have to try and sell yourself.
Yes. I always say in marketing, once you have brand, your cost of conversions go down. You know, so simple thing like no one Google's cloud storage, cloud storage space anymore, right? They Google
Mhm.
Amazon Web Storage, or they Google what was it, shared space or whatever. So you sort of replace something. When you don't say ride sharing anymore. You say I Uber to your place. So when you have a brand, you decrease the cost of people actually of spending on advertising, because people actually associate you with the verb or the object.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to your point, a lot of people will often kind of lump branding in with marketing, and they're
Mm,
very closely related, but they
mm,
are different in the fact that branding is about positioning yourself to have effective marketing.
mm.
You go out and start marketing yourself, but if you're not positioned correctly, you may not see much of a return from it.
Yeah. If you're positioned correctly, like I say, it will reduce cost because people should associate you with that product or that action. And what I see in maybe 2019, it's not something new, but more and more of brands are moving towards a personal brand. I think, like you said, brand does not mean just the logo. It means the emotions, But a lot of brands are moving towards being a person. Like Virgin Airlines. You sort of think of the logo, but you will not miss thinking about the founder as well. What are your thoughts on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I do think it's important for you to focus on your branding as a company in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Focusing on messaging, focus
Mm-hmm.
on your logo design, which is part of your brand identity, which includes your colors and your whole aesthetic. That
Mm.
part is important, but in the age of social media, it's become more important to brand or create a brand around one personality.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned, Virgin Airlines is a good example. Is it Richard Branson, the
Yeah, yeah,
founder? I mean, that's who you think of. Same with Apple. I mean, even though he's deceased, you think of Steve Jobs when you think of
yeah.
Apple. Um, and so, but with on social media, people are on there to connect with their friends, their family, and connect with new people. They're not really on there to interact with these faceless companies. They want
Mm.
to connect with people. And there definitely are some examples of some ways, some creative ways people have done this beyond having one personality. Like for example, Wendy's. If you have ever seen their Twitter
Yeah,
account,
it's here in Malaysia too. It's here. Yeah, and it's very, yeah.
yeah, like Wendy's, they do a great job of. They're still kind of a little bit more of like the company corporate side, but they are um, they're creating a personality by being just funny and roasting other people online, and they're creating that personality around their brand. But for most people, especially if you're a small business owner, your brand is you. So I
Mm.
really recommend people trying to build their brand around who they are.
Yes, yes. Especially if you are in the services industry, if you're doing a consulting or you are doing, accounting or whatever, uh, especially when you're selling a service, the top law firms are named after top lawyers, the top auditing firms and advertising firms are people essentially when they started. Now we forgot who they are, but, people like Sachi, people like, McKinsey used to be a person, right? So it all
Yep.
started with personal branding, and now they are so big that people forgot actually it started from one person.
Yep.
Yeah. So look, I work with a lot of startups here in Asia. I work with their marketing and their growth hacking in some ways. And one thing that I realized a lot of startups don't do is they don't create that brand identity, which I think is one of your specialties. So what is the importance of creating that consistency and brand identity?
Yeah, great question. So, just to define that for some people who may not know, a brand
Mm,
identity is really the aesthetics of your brand.
mm,
And oftentimes people will think of a branding as your logo design. So your logo design is part of your brand identity. But then, like I said before, your colors, your typography, any images associated with what you're doing, your photography, icons that you may have on your website, all these things come together to create a cohesive brand aesthetic. And so over time, what people are going to start to do is they're going to recognize that look as your company. And over time, as you continue to deliver a great service, they're also going to attach their personal feelings and emotions towards those aesthetics when they see them. So it's really a long-term play when you're thinking about those that brand identity.
Yep, yep. And also to make sure it's consistent across all materials, from emails to website to all marketing materials.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of why my main services are branding and web design, because your website is one of your most important marketing assets, and it's really important that you carry over your brand identity on there, and then also your brand messaging, which is something I also help with.
Yep, yep. How do you help companies with brand messaging? How maybe you need to discover what they're about, discover their story, and make sure it's amplified. How do you help companies with brand messaging?
Yeah, great question. So, and even before we even tackled the brand identity, one thing I do focus on is the strategy behind your brand. So, a lot of it is just about me asking the right questions, because a lot of the times the founders probably have these things in their head about the sort of brand that they're trying to create. Um, I just need to basically ask the questions so we can articulate those things. So we articulate, what is your culture? What is your tone of voice?
Mm.
What is the impact that people are going to come away with from interacting with your company? And with that comes like the value that you're providing for them. We also need to articulate who your target customer is.
Mm.
And by the time someone is coming to me, oftentimes they haven't really articulated that. At least they haven't narrowed it down enough. So I also help them clarify that aspect. So all of this is able to assist me in designing their brand identity, but then also your messaging.
Mm.
Because with a lot of companies, I've found they have a lot of trouble speaking the language of their customer. Oftentimes they use jargon that ends up confusing people.
Mm.
They're so entrenched in what they're doing. They think, oh, everybody knows these terms. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But that's not necessarily true. So I'm
Mm.
able to kind of act as an um, outside perspective on that
Yeah.
and help them to clarify that. And this comes to be very important on your website, especially because you really only have about 10 seconds to capture people's attention, make sure that they know that they're on the site that they were looking for, and
Mm.
make sure that you're really going to solve the problem that they have. And that's also another aspect of messaging that people get wrong, is they focus too much on the features instead of focusing on the end result. How are you going to make their life better?
Mm.
And with that, you may be familiar with this book. Have you heard of the book Story Brand?
No, I've not.
Well, this philosophy is something that I really try to carry over to the messaging side of my branding services, because a lot of companies, when they are approaching messaging, they're positioning themselves as the hero.
Mm.
So with this philosophy, they look at the elements of a story, and when it comes to marketing yourself, you should be positioning yourself not as the hero, but as the guide. So in every story, there's a guide that basically helps the hero along to achieve whatever it is they're out to achieve. So in Star Wars, you have Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's the guide to Luke Skywalker, or you have Gandalf, who's the guide to Bilbo in The Hobbit. And so instead of just saying, hey, look at how great we are, look at all the things that we can do, you want to come along and say, hey, here's how we can help you get what you want. Does
Great.
that make sense?
Yes, great stuff, Luke. I've never heard a better analogy. So next time I work with brands, I'll tell them, or work with businesses, your brand is Gandalf. You are the guide, you are the light, to Bilbo Baggins. So that's a great
Absolutely.
analogy.
And of course, there's other elements that go into that as well. Like you have a villain in every story, and you have some sort of struggle. So we have to kind of articulate what is the struggle that your customer has that you're going to help them overcome. Because if you start to use that language, that's really going to speak to not just the external problems they have, but the internal problems.
Mm-hmm.
So with every person, when they make a buying decision, you probably know this, that people buy based on emotion. And so if you can speak to not just the external side of what you see you're trying to solve for them, and speak to the internal side, that's going to be much more powerful. And let me give you an example of this to make it a little more concrete. So I worked with a company last year. They are a teeth whitening boutique. So from an external standpoint, you see, okay, the end result, how they're making their life better is they're getting white teeth. But how can we go deeper than that? What is the real reason that they even want to have white teeth in the first place? And we came to realize that the answer is confidence. So that was kind of the key impact that we came up with for that company. And we came up with a tagline, show the world your best self. And also just touched on that idea of confidence throughout other parts of their messaging.
Wow, that's a great story. That is what everyone needs to talk about. I work with the same issues as well because I work with a lot of clients on content, and I must say now we should create the content around Sauron. Create content based on your clients' challenges. The journey, or create content. As the Gandalf to help the clients to get to their goals, which is great. So the goal is confidence, and that's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've worked with some amazing clients. So what is your experience when it comes to mistakes that people make when it comes to branding? What are some of the common mistakes that you see?
Yeah, very good question. So definitely a lot of them you'll see inconsistency on the aesthetic side between their business cards, their website,
Yeah.
and that is that's hurting them in the long run because you're not building up that brand equity so that people will recognize you over time.
Mm.
I mean, again, the messaging is a huge one. I think people just they don't realize how much they're alienating their customers by not speaking their language.
Yeah.
Trying to think of some other big mistakes that I see them making.
Okay, so I have friends who are designers like you, and what they always tell me, they tell me from the bottom of their heart when they see something that triggers them. So, for example, a brand who does not invest in fonts for their logo, they use something like Papyrus as their font, some free font that everyone can use. They use it as their logo. Or I don't know. There's so many. I have a friend who's a designer, and this sort of thing triggers him. But what about you?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with one thing. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely Papyrus. That font is a little iffy.
Yeah.
You don't want to use Comic Sans.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Let me change the question a bit.
Yeah, no problem.
So what I'm trying to get to is a lot of startups, especially that I work with, spend a lot of money on marketing, spend a lot of money on, capex, a lot of money in technology, but they don't invest in branding, because they might just slap on a logo that they created with Papyrus because they don't see the value investing in branding. So why should companies invest in branding?
Yeah. So it really goes back to, are you thinking about the short term, which is just to get a quick logo on Fiverr or Upwork, or are you really trying to build a company, and it really starts by being consistent early on. And I definitely understand not all startups have much of a budget when they're first starting out to invest in branding, but I think as soon as you can, it will be really important for your marketing. And if you have salespeople, it'll just make their job so much easier to have for them to come to the table with a brand that's already a little bit reputable.
Yes, and consistency in branding and all the things you talk about with the good messaging helps you to build that credibility. It helps to show people you're not just a startup, you are also a brand that sees themselves as a long-term brand and sees the value in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and you often don't realize how much those aesthetics take part in showing your professionality. And like you said, you can actually appear so much bigger by having good branding than if you don't. Even if you're just one or two members of your company, you can actually appear like this much larger organization.
Great stuff, Luke. So moving on to the end of our session, it was a great chat. So I know you've been very active on LinkedIn. You've been giving LinkedIn marketing tips. So how should someone brand themselves on LinkedIn?
So you really need to pay attention to your profile because you want to realize that if you're trying to build connections, or if you're trying to get customers to reach out, or potential customers to reach out to you, they're going to pay attention to your profile. And there are a lot of different elements you need to pay attention to. So first of all is your headline.
Hmm.
I did a video recently talking about this, and you definitely want to pay attention to some of the messaging things that I had mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But just realize that every time that you post a video, post an article, or even when you leave a comment, your headline is going to be attached to that comment. And no other social media has that benefit. You can basically have a little advertisement for every single time you engage on LinkedIn. So that is huge. And that will often get people to view your profile. So now you kind of have the job to wow them when they're on there.
Hmm.
And so your profile photo is extremely important. You want to pay attention to the person you're trying to build, and does that reflect in your photo? Are you trying to appear confident? Are you trying to appear professional, goofy? Whatever it is, you need to make sure that it's portrayed in your profile photo. And then make sure you have a cover photo that you can just kind of use that, similar to like a website banner. You can use the imagery to just show like the end results of what you're offering for people in kind of a visual way. And there's other aspects you really need to pay attention to. Your about section. You can add some additional featured content on there. You can add an article that demonstrates your knowledge. You can build up your recommendations, and your recommendations on LinkedIn are basically testimonials. And so that takes some time to build up, but it's really important for building trust with people. And that's ultimately what you're using your profile to do, and branding your profile to do, is to build trust with people.
Great stuff, Luke. I truly agree with every single point that you said. A lot of people, ignored or dismissed, or was not aware of all these points, especially the headline. I would like to add that if you like to be found for something, for example, web design or branding, make sure it's part of your headline, because that's what triggers the Google search algorithm. So it hits that headline first, not other parts of the profile. So that's very important. And profile pic, yeah. You're saying?
Absolutely. And another thing on your headline, a lot of people, because LinkedIn has been around for a while, I think they're used to just posting what their title is. The CEO of whatever.
No,
you're an entrepreneur.
And that is not people's fault. That is not entirely someone's fault. I know you said that. You know what happens is, because there's a LinkedIn function when you add an experience, they ask you, do you want to add this and a headline? And a lot of people hit yes, and then becomes their headline.
I know, exactly. And you have to be a little proactive to make sure that it says the right thing that you wanted to say. Because again, if it just says CEO or entrepreneur or innovation leader, that doesn't really share how you're going to help that person. Like if they are, like, for instance, for me, if someone is looking for web design or branding, but all I say is founder of 19 Pro, they're going to have no idea that I have what they need. So just that's something to pay attention to for sure.
Yep. Great stuff, Luke. So look forward to more of your content. Great talking to you. And everyone, please check out Luke Seavers on LinkedIn, and check out his YouTube channel as well, and his amazing videos. So thanks so much, Luke.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.